Good afternoon, and welcome to today's episode of From the Command Post. I'm Battalion Chief Mark Davis. We're live here this afternoon from the Command Lab at our Public Safety Training Academy. Today's episode is about an event that occurred back in January down in the Bethesda-Glen-Echo area, Westbard Avenue. It was an unusual event in that not a lot of fire activity, but the fire department was involved in actually a couple-day event, and it ended up with the evacuation of a high-rise building. So we thought it was important to talk about all the things that happened during basically that 24, 48-hour time period, all the pieces that worked together to help make this happen. Because moving forward, right, we have old infrastructure throughout Montgomery County, getting older, meaning our larger buildings, and this certainly is on the horizon for a repeat event somewhere pretty short. As always, if you are a certified chief officer and you're wishing to receive COPDI credit, then make sure you fill out the form on the quick links page for the Training Academy's website. If you're watching in a station, then we ask that you simply in the YouTube chat identify what station you're watching from and how many people are watching with you. If you have questions as we go about the episode, feel free to type them into the YouTube chat, and we'll try to get them to the panelists as best we can given the time that we have. Today's episode is allocated 90 minutes. That's traditionally what a From the Command Post is. If it doesn't go that long, that's okay, but at least be prepared for 90 minutes of discussion. Also, always, as with any of our episodes, right, every incident's different, actions taken are different, and right, we have our incident commanders who have the ability to do things as they're needed to occur. So I always like to say that, hey, the views and opinions expressed during this episode aren't necessarily, right, the marching orders of MCFRS, but they were occurred based upon, right, the rater for today, Chief Gibson.
Thank you, Chief Davis, and welcome everybody. As Chief Davis stated, this is going to be a little bit of a different incident from what we're used to. You know, usually we're talking about fires and more bread and butter stuff. This is going to be a bit of a complex incident that involved a bunch of outside agencies, and we had to use a little bit of different parts of our Rolodexes and our brains to kind of deal with. I was unfortunate enough to participate in something similar to this. If you guys remember the episode from the Georgia Avenue bomb incident that Chief Dimitriadis and I did last year sometime, something similar. So to continue to push Chief Davis's point, this is something that we're running more and more often, and I think this would be a good platform for us to be able to talk about this and hopefully get everybody into the same mindset and give some people some tools on what to do if they are in the same situation. So to begin, I'm going to introduce our panel for today, right? So here to my right, first is going to be Chief Russell Blinkhorn, assigned to Battalion 2 on A shift. B shift, there you go. A shift is better, but we'll go with that. Chief Sherburne from BCC. We got Chief Nineheart assigned to headquarters currently, and then Chief Pezos, who's the B shift doc, right? So without further ado, we'll get started. So my first question is going to be to you, Chief Blinkhorn, right? You were the first incident commander, first chief officer responding on the incident. So, and I'll be honest, I don't know a ton about this on purpose, right? I think you guys have heard Chief Cooper come up here before and talk. I tried to not on purpose read into these incidents, so I'd have some genuine questions, and hopefully the people that are watching will have similar ideas and thoughts. So you were the first incident commander, first BC responding to the incident. What were you thinking? Was this a normal call from the get? How was it dispatched? Take us to that.
Yeah, so this was in the evening. I think it was raining. It was raining. It got dispatched as an adaptive, so it was 2 engines in a truck. Again, the address is 5401 Westbard Avenue, which is a 15-story high-rise. And it got dispatched as an adaptive for a electrical odor. I was sitting in my office. I heard engines 711 give an update, basically requiring to fill the requesting to fill the box because they had smoke on the first floor. And they might even said smoke on multiple floors, but they filled the box, so I got out the door pretty quickly. Like you said, I was the first chief to arrive.
Okay. And then just real quick, because I'm going to interrupt.
That's fine.
So
Yeah.
I have a question. So is this common practice for you to have Bravo plane? Was that on your desk, over the head? How do you normally set up your office?
It's
so
both.
that you stay.
So dispatch and ops are both on the overhead speakers.
Okay.
Yep.
All
At least when I'm working. So yeah, I did hear them request to fill the box. So I got out the door pretty quickly. Was the first chief officer to arrive. Chief Sherburne showed up basically right behind me. So he got in the vehicle with me. We established stationary command post. Quickly, I was listening to the radio traffic en route, which consisted of, there was a lot of talk about checking the multiple floors, checking the trash rooms, trash chutes, et cetera. So that was the update I got from Engine 711, was that they had smoke on multiple floors. Somewhere along the lines, I don't know if it was in the dispatch or in the update, but there was a report of smoke in the first floor electrical room. But for the first, I'd say 10 minutes of the event, there was a lot of talk about checking the trash chute and trash compactor, and those kept coming back clear, so I wanted to redirect the efforts back to electrical. And it didn't sound like anybody had checked a couple of the electrical rooms that the reports were coming from. But long story short, they did end up finding an electrical problem in the electrical room, which was in the parking garage. Now, an electrical fire can, especially in these high rises, can mimic a lot of the characteristics of a trash chute fire, right? Especially if you have stacked electrical rooms, which is probably why we were getting smoke on multiple floors. But the problem itself was located actually in the parking garage.
Subfloor.
Right. I think it was one level down.
Okay.
But so yeah, in the end, it was an electrical issue.
So up to
Yeah.
this point, just a smoke scare, right? We run 1,000 of these a day, I would say, right? You got an electrical order on multiple floors. You guys went through the normal everyday IRP stuff, right? On-scene reports, checking the lowest level. They assumed that it was in the trash room. We did some critical thinking, figured it out. It was in the electrical room. We found a smoke. We removed it. Was there any smoke removal efforts at all?
Absolutely, yeah. So
Okay.
actually throughout the building, I set up a ventilation group, put them on an alternate talk group, and they coordinated their ventilation efforts because there was smoke on multiple floors. And I want to go back to the fact that it was raining, right? And this problem, I think, was caused by the rain getting in some of the underground conduits, much like the Metro event many years ago in D.C., which caused that arcing event. So an arcing event can cause, even though it's not a big fire event, it can cause a lot of smoke. And it's actually dangerous to be anywhere near. If you could just go to YouTube and look up arc flash, you can see that it's not something you want to be standing around when it happens. So I got these pictures that were sent to Chief Fabrizio, was the second chief as Battalion 1. He showed up and he was assigned to the interior. He did send me some of these pictures to the command post. So again, confirmed the fact that we had some sort of arcing event in the electrical room in the parking garage. Now my question was, I started going back to, okay, so it's not arcing now. We're dealing with the ventilation. So some of my questions we started coming up with were, all right, what parts of this building, because looking at the building, you could see lights, right? So I knew that the entire building was not without power. Parts of it at least had power. So I wanted to, because I was getting reports that the fire alarm wasn't working. I had assigned a company to take control of the elevators, and then come to find out the elevators weren't working. So some of the pieces of the puzzle started coming into play, like, okay, well, we got at least some parts of this building that are without power due to this arcing event. So PEPCO was called, right as soon as, I think I might even called PEPCO en route, right? When I heard there was an electrical issue, I said notify PEPCO.
That's my recollection.
Yeah.
So PEPCO was notified right away, so they were en route.
Yeah, so a couple of things. So
Yep.
Chief Fabrizio was that third chief officer. You utilized him as a forward observer.
Correct, exactly right.
Did you give him an assignment, or you just say, hey, can you go put some eyes on this for me?
That's what I said.
Okay.
Yep.
All right, awesome. And I had another question, but I can't remember what it is right now. So, all right.
Yeah.
Yep.
So moving forward, just to kind of nexus into what caused the extended event here. I guess I have a bit of an advantage because I have an electrical background, and I was getting these reports from the companies that the maintenance man who was on site had advised that an electrician was en route with about an hour, I think 45 minutes to an hour ETA. So, okay, that's good. Pepco showed up and confirmed that 2 of the 3 phases going into this building had failed. So this arcing event had caused some of their equipment, whether it be fuses or a transformer, something out front had failed and that they needed to either replace or repair. But they couldn't do that until the problem inside the building was obviously isolated, right? These burnt up cables, wires had to be isolated, repaired, jumped around. Something had to happen before Pepco could re-energize the 2 phases back to the building. So it kind of became a priority of, okay, well, we need to get an electrician here to find out.
And this was pretty deep into the incident.
I don't want to say it was deep, maybe an hour until we started really talking about, okay, we know the next step is getting an electrician in here to put eyes on it, right?
So
to figure out whether I wanted to know, are these service lines coming in, or are they some sort of building infrastructure feeders?
Sure. And were you getting any calls from citizens? You know, we run these high-rise fires, and hey, citizen in apartment 1208 needs help evacuating.
Yep.
And so, how did you manage that?
There were a couple of them, and I gave the common phrase of, Montgomery, have anybody else that calls shelter in place.
Okay.
But the apartments that we did get, I think I sent a unit or 2 up just to check on them and make sure they were good and tell them that they were good to shelter in place.
So did you do something along the lines of, at the end, getting Montgomery to follow up on all those apartments and getting units to check on that, or did you feel comfortable with checking the ones that, you had already managed?
Any apartments that came to me in the command post that,
Yep.
we got residents that are handicapped that can't get out.
Right.
I sent somebody up just to talk to them,
Awesome.
to reassure them that they were safe to stay in their apartments.
Yeah, that happens often, right,
Yep.
to a lot of us. And I think actually in the last promotional exam, we kind of threw that in there as a distractor. But it does happen often, and I think it's important to highlight that kind of
Yeah,
stuff.
you don't want to disregard that or not
Yeah.
send anybody up to check on them, because then they're going to do everything they can to self-evacuate when you want them to stay in place.
Right.
And then they become even a bigger problem that you have to deal with.
Yeah. So at what point, listening to companies giving you these different tidbits, right? You're starting to put that puzzle together now that this is not just a smoke scare. You have an electrical thing. Chief Fabrizio has sent you those pictures, and now and because of your electric background, you're thinking, okay, this is going to be a potential problem. At what point did you realize that this is now turning into a little bit more of a complex incident?
That didn't happen, and this is probably one of the key takeaways from this event was me getting out of the command post and going to talk to the maintenance man myself, right? Because we were getting reports, again, from unit officers that were talking to him, hey, that he has an electrician en route. So we waited around for over an hour and kept getting these reports. Oh, he's still on his way. So I said, let me go talk to this guy face to face. So I tracked him down, and again, this is just the maintenance man, right? He's not. I wouldn't even call him an engineer.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't seem to know much about the building. But I asked him. I said, "Okay, you have an electrician en route, right?" And he said, "Well, my generator guy's en route." And I said, "Well, that's not going to work because I don't want you starting up the generator, because that's just going to have the problem's going to resurface if we re-energize these wires that have already shorted out." Right, and I can tell you when your generator guy gets here, he's just going to lock out the generator and make sure that it doesn't start. So we need an actual electrician here. So I went back and forth with him for probably a good almost an hour until we finally got a hold of an electrician, and the electrician said, your problem's above my scope of work, so I'm not coming out either.
Huh.
So this was probably, at least 2 or 3 hours into the event
Okay.
where we finally figured out, okay, we don't even have an electrician en route, nor do we even know which one they are going to call.
Okay.
So,
All right.
so yeah.
Before we get deeper, let's go to
Yep.
Chief Sherburne, right? So you were the second command officer to arrive on scene, right? So we're going to skip a little bit forward. But once you got in the car and you're starting to put these pieces together, what kind of conversations did you have, right? And we can talk about the use of command action guidelines, but obviously on this incident, a second CCO command sheet would have fit you for the first 15, 20 minutes. But after that, what was your thought process, and how did you support Chief Blinkhorn?
So, I run a fair amount of calls battalion to Chief Blinkhorn, and I work a lot together, so we kind of have a working tempo. I would ask the folks in the operations room to put the slides up that have the Bravo, Charlie, and Delta sides. So just come into the scene. So that's the Bravo side. There's a significant elevation change in the building, just for people's note, from front to rear. As you pass if you come from Little Falls Parkway, the next slide, you see that view from River Road, which sort of hides the fact that there's a significant elevation change. But if you look in the back, you see the next slide. The next slide should be the Delta, I'm sorry, the second side, C slide. You see that where one of the entrances to the parking garage is, the other one's on the Bravo side. And then the Delta side doesn't really have much on it. So I got there, I was in the BCC command platform, so I put that on the Delta side of the building, turned on the VRS, and then
great.
went back so it took me a couple minutes from when I got to the scene to actually get back to Chief Blinkhorn. I sat in, and when I first sat down, I wasn't really sure if this was a significant incident yet. And we had the smoke, but the smoke reports were not coming back as like IDLH smoke, just to compare to Pooks Hill Road a number of years ago, where it really did, an electrical problem caused an IDLH problem. It was more like, almost like slightly above nuisance levels. So I really wasn't sure, what the story with the incident was. The one thing he did not mention is about 20 minutes into the incident, we did have ambulance 711 Bravo find one patient who apparently, I think, was injured from evacuating, not from the smoke.
Okay.
So that did sort of make us wonder for a minute or two, was this going to escalate on the EMS side?
Sure.
Which didn't happen.
And so, quick question: do you guys run this building often? In the 2nd Battalion, is this a building like that you guys are super familiar with?
11 does. I was not super familiar with it because it's been a number of years since I had been there. But
so what made you think about putting the car on the Delta side and turning on VRS? Because that's
just because it was as far from Blinky as I could get access to, without having to walk 10 miles.
Right.
And I just figured it's a big building, so.
Yeah, I was wondering if you knew that there were radio problems. Are there radio problems in that building? And
well, I wasn't expecting it, but on any sub-level building, you can always have radio
Sure.
problems. So
that's just a good.
and
That's a good
just
thought.
thinking about it, I know we're under a bunch of radio towers there, so but no, I just did it just because it was far away, and it was just almost like protocol. So I honestly didn't do a lot other than just sort of bounce ideas off him. I think this was till later in the incident, but I know right around the time Chief Pezos showed up, I did say, this is going to escalate, and we need to start thinking about a command bus.
Okay.
Or some other stuff, just because I think
just to back up for a second, when
on the initial operations.
Yep.
Honestly, I was more really just sort of observing and bouncing things off. I didn't really do much,
Sure.
except I don't know exactly how long it was, maybe 60 minutes in the incident.
So-
I did coordinate a door-to-door knocking we had people visit every floor,
Yep.
knock on the apartments that were there, try and give us a census of who was there, what kind of power did they have, and tell them to shelter in place.
Yeah. So was this an incident that you used your command chart for in the beginning? I know, being a smoke scare, hey, we some people do, some people
Yeah,
don't.
I was using it.
Okay,
So
so-
one thing I did mention that I at least want to give credit for was there were people evacuating, right, and the elderly person that needed to be transported, I think was just from exhaustion or some sort of cardiac event from walking the stairs. But we did recognize pretty early that we needed a place to shelter all these people because it was raining pretty heavily, and EMS 702 did a great job going next door to the bowling alley, securing that, and the bowling alley staff was excellent, right? They said, come on in, and they made room for everybody. They actually made pizzas.
Oh, cool.
Late. I mean, this was hours into the event, but they brought pizzas over for everybody. But we basically set up, kind of an evacuation shelter-in-place area in the bowling alley next door. Yeah.
Okay.
And EMS 702 was assigned to that.
Awesome. That's good stuff. So, Chief Pezos, let's get to you now. So you're hearing this stuff. You're sitting over there at the doc office, comfortable, right? Watching MASH. I don't know what you guys do over there. So at what point, what did you hear that made you trigger, hey, I need to get involved? Was there something that you heard? Were you already headed that way? Just how did you play into all of
Yeah,
this?
so I heard on 7 Alpha 1, engine 711 saying that they had smoke on the first floor and they weren't able to find the source. So as soon as they called to fill the box, then I started to leave. So going down the road, then we get reports that there's smoke on the first, second, third, and 10th floor. Okay, I'm a little bit apprehensive because that's an old building, and now we have smoke. And then later on, after that, we hear that there's no fire alarm. Okay, well, that gets my...
And no ventilation system in the building, right?
Correct, yeah.
Built in.
Right.
No,
Okay.
this is an old building.
Got it.
So I arrived on the scene, and I met with command. By this time, they had already progressed to the fire pretty much being under controlled. Blank had already set up a different channel for the ventilation group, which was great. They already had people going into the bowling alley, which was great. And then we started to figure out that there are places in this building that don't have power. So the first thing I went into the command post and said, I think you're going to dump this building.
Yeah. And how much of the building did not have power at this point?
So that was a good question, right?
Yeah.
And that's what I wanted to go talk to the maintenance man about to try to figure out.
Get an
Of course,
idea.
he didn't know either, but we knew that the elevators weren't working. We knew that the fire alarm was completely dead and had been dead for actually months, unfortunately, because they had a security guard there doing fire watch. Come to find out, so the elevators were dead. The fire alarm was dead. A good amount of lights, the stairwell lights were dead.
Wow.
But it sounded like a good portion of the apartments and the heat were still working.
Okay.
That's what I wanted to know.
I think you had reports of, on some floors, you had the hallways out, but the apartments on.
It was
And
very
some other
sporadic.
floors,
Yeah,
you
it was
had
very sporadic.
lights on in the hallway, but the apartments were out.
But
The
you
opposite.
guys knew for sure that whatever the emergency was affected elevator and stairwell lighting, which are too big, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like people coming in and out of the building.
Correct.
Actually, I think one stairwell had lights and one didn't, if I recall correctly. But that's information that I got the second day. I didn't know that night.
At that time, right? Okay. Chief?
Yeah, so my role is to supplement command, right? It's to figure out, let's take on some of the responsibilities so that Blinkhorn doesn't have, so he can mitigate the incident. So I started to make notifications to Red Cross, not knowing how large of a scale this possible relocation, if we were going to relocate, might be. I know we had a building in Tacoma Park that was already being dumped. So OEM HS was already involved in that relocation. They were inside the county to make contact with the representative of OEM. But we knew that this was going to grow. I think we weren't at that point knowing how much of the building was involved.
Okay, so at this point, we've been there for 2-3 hours, right? We've mitigated the smoke, we removed the smoke. We have a sense of what the power outage has caused, how has it affected the building, excuse me. So we knew elevators, hallways, stairwells were a problem. Some people were already kind of being taken care of. How did this continue to escalate? Anybody can answer that.
Well, so one thing I want to mention is that we know not so much the dangers, but we know how difficult it is to relocate a building of this size, 15 floors, and we don't take it very lightly, right?
Yep.
We gave its due diligence to figure out if PEPCO can resolve the issue. That took some time for PEPCO to arrive. We gave the due diligence to figure out if a building electrician can take care of the issue. That didn't resolve the case, and then, you know, the generator guy was another case. So we had tried to resolve it locally as much as we can, knowing that if we don't, this was going to be a long incident.
Sure.
Taking into account the fire was already out, the smoke had already dissipated, some of the residents had already relocated. the only thing for fire rescue is to support and prevent anybody from injuring themselves even further, right?
Sure.
I think at some point, I was letting command know, hey, the fire alarm system's out. You don't have any communications with any of the residents. 30 minutes into the incident, someone is complaining that they have a cardiac event and they just evacuated. Well, we don't want that to drag on into more residents.
Sure.
So the decision is to have those companies go floor to floor and then make some communication, starting from the top floor.
Oh,
down.
okay, so I think that's important. So the three of you guys in the car had this conversation, and how did you have enough resources on the scene to accomplish that, right? Because that's obviously going to be 15 floors. Even if we give that to one company each, that's a lot of climbing up and then getting that information back down. How did you guys manage or coordinate that effort? And what was the message that you told them to give, right?
So I think we're jumping ahead a little bit here.
Okay, if there's something I'm missing, please fill in.
I'll defer, but I do want to point out the fact that at some point, through Chief Pezos's notifications, and I guess just through the radio chatter, right, we had the ops chief show up, Chief Neidhart showed up, Chief Richards showed up. So a lot of the administrative staff started showing up because they knew, as we knew, after we determined that the electrical power was not going to be restored that night, that this most likely was going to end up in some sort of evacuation, right? Whether it was that night or the next day is what we were trying to determine. But at that point, there was a lot of agency. I think OEM showed up at that point. OEM, I think, was the first
And
one
who
to
called
show
those
up.
guys? You did.
Yep.
So who else did you call? OEM?
Red Cross, DPS.
Okay.
Um,
And DPS, sorry, Department of...
Yeah, it's
Permit-
code enforcement.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I can't say fire
We're
code
laughing because we were just
enforcement
talking about all the acronyms, right?
Permitting
Yeah.
services.
Yeah, okay. And do you, is that something that you guys as docs, right, you guys know, hey, I need to contact X, Y, and Z on every incident? And what is the thought process there?
I think the battalion chiefs as well as the duty chiefs know that their involvement needs to be included anytime a life safety feature is not working.
Sure.
So, especially if you're going to evacuate.
Sure, and I was thinking more of like from a doc level, right? I can speak from the battalion level that, hey, if the fire alarm system is out, I'm going to talk to a code guy.
Mm-hmm.
But who outside of that circle do you guys commonly communicate, and how have you built those relationships to prepare for something like this?
Yeah, so each shift, as we all know, code enforcement person is on duty, and it's listed on the operations
Yep.
briefing.
Mhm.
I just go direct with that person. If
Right.
at any time I'm unable to locate that person, I have a contact, the person's supervisor that I can go to and try to resolve getting them involved.
And just from being the doc on B shift, you've had the opportunity to meet these guys, and you have their number and
Yeah,
those sort of things?
yeah.
Okay. Okay. Is there anything we're missing before I go to Chief Neidhart?
Well, so during my extended back and forth with the maintenance man, I think this is another important point that kind of got the snowball rolling larger and larger, was he was talking to the building, I guess, manager, who, has an office there in the building. And I don't think he was quite relaying the magnitude of the event. So I asked to speak to her personally, and I told her what was going on, and I said, you need to call your boss because we need to figure out what electrical contractor you're going to have in here.
Yep.
So that's when I think a lot of people started showing up, and we had a couple large, in-person meetings in the little, area behind the lobby there. And I think that's when I'll start to defer to Chief Neidhart.
Yeah.
When planning really came into place, all right, this is going to be extended, this now involves some planning. And I'll let him speak to this, but one thing I remember out of that meeting was us discussing whether or not we evacuate that night or we evacuate in the morning, right? And at that point, the head of, I want to say, who actually manages the building there?
HOC.
Well, it's a Realty Investment
Yeah.
Trust, Caprit.
But HOC, so HOC
Oh.
is involved, right? But I think the head of HOC showed up and was involved in the decision making. And Chief Bailey had asked, "What does it get you if we wait till the morning?" And his answer was, "I can bring in an electrical engineer and see if we can actually bring in a large generator to bypass this entire problem and power up the entire building."
Okay.
Right? And they looked at me and I said, "That's a pretty good answer." But I'll defer to Chief.
So there
Howard.
were a lot of
Planning.
options here.
There
right?
were-
And a lot of
yeah.
complexity and things you guys had to consider before even thinking about pulling these people out into the street, right?
Yeah,
So,
and,
go ahead.
just to clarify what Chief Blankhorn was saying, the team that was together at that point was, he was a vice president of real estate or something from Caprit, which was the real estate trust that owns the building.
Okay.
Or, excuse me, that manages the building for the Housing Opportunities Commission.
Got it.
There was the Housing Opportunities Commission is actually the owner. The emergency manager from HOC was also there, and the building manager with the office in the building. Those were kind of the.
So you guys were running like a unified
that
command post.
call about you need to get your supervisors
All my
here
talking
worked.
points, Stevie.
Okay, so, but that's who we were
All
talking
right,
about.
let's stop stealing Chris's
it's-
talking
I'll
point.
say
So,
it was
Chris,
pretty-
how were you activated, right? And I
Okay.
used the word activated loosely, right? How were you called into this? How were you brought in? And what were your marching orders? And how did you help? A lot of questions.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I got a text that said, "Hey, can you make it to the county? There's an event going on." I said, "Sure," because I'm new and I didn't know better. So I had a comedy of errors. I was not in my car, so I didn't have MDC access. I didn't have a radio because the radio I'd left at work, which was a big mistake. I tried to pull up Zello. I had no idea what was going on. So I walked into what looked like a box alarm de-escalating a building that had some lights on and every white shirt person I know. So that's how I got involved. What was the next part? Just keep telling the story?
Yep, just keep telling your story.
So, I met with Chief Pezos at what I thought was the command post, but it was clear we were about to transition to a more hardened structure in the meeting room. He said, "Hey, we're about to have a meeting. Let's walk on in." So I walked in. There were all sorts of people, some in uniform, some not. And it was clear that the ops chief and the incident command were about to sort of lay out where we are. And I realized I've had an aha moment while I've been sitting here that I'd like to share. But I was thinking in my mind about the process that I went through, and it was LCAN. LCAN got me at the command level. So for me, I was trying to locate where we were in this incident because I didn't really have a frame of reference. What were the conditions of the building and the conditions of sort of our resources and all that? And that was a big question. What actions were ongoing and had gone on, and what needs we needed to address. And so I would say, looking back a couple months now, what I walked into was the question of, okay, here's where are we and what are we about to do? Because as Chief Pezos said, and I want to reiterate, I didn't feel like I understood this as a company officer, but I'm starting to get now. Making 200 families homeless, even if only for the night, is a really big deal.
Sure.
So that's, I don't know, that's where I went.
Right, and it kind of touches like a gray area for the fire department, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because I think as the fire department in America has evolved, we are now doing all of these other stuff
Yeah.
other than it's not just putting fire outs and saving babies anymore, right?
Yeah.
We're doing stuff like emergency management and having these bigger discussions and working with all of these different diverse groups within county government, right? So that's a really good point. So you got there, you oriented yourself,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
You got brought into the mix, and then what other roles did you play into the
So
event?
I would say functionally, I wasn't given marching orders to start. And where I saw a need was that we had a command post is maybe not the right word, in an open room with an open door with a lot of people.
A gathering?
Yep. So the first thing I did was sort of try to figure out, well, who are you? And what do you do for this situation? And the more I've thought about it, I would argue that we had in that room, and going forward, something I'd stick to, one of three people. You can either be a part of the command team, you can make decisions, you can be a support to the command team, you can make actual decisions, or you're a subject matter expert, and everyone else needs to go away. I didn't have to kick anyone out because it seemed like we sort of found a spot where people were pretty disciplined, but we did sort of secure that area. Part of it, too, was documentation. I don't mean to jump around here, but a lesson I learned in orienting ourselves to the situation, that building office didn't have power. So something as simple as a list of who lives where was, first it was, well, we can't get the computer on. Then it was, I have it on my phone, but I can't print it, right? So I felt like I stepped into a planning role of just sort of documenting, okay, well, who are you? How do I contact you, right? Because you don't have a radio. Who's coming from your agency? What powers do you have? And specifically with the building, where are we at with communications and our sort of assessment of this structure?
So is it fair to say that fire and rescue took a lead role in this, or were you more supporting somebody else?
I would say at that moment, it felt like we were operating in an incident command, because you hinted at unified command, which was a big sort of lesson for me, or how I feel about it. I guess I'll put that. That's Neidhart's opinion. At that moment, we were operating an incident command. It was our incident, but we were about to transition to something else, to a unified command or a support role. So I felt like I walked in right sort of at that nexus point. Units are starting to get cleared. We're trying to make decision on who's staying. What are we doing with these people? Is this our problem? Whose problem is it? That's sort of where I showed up.
So when was the decision made, go, no go, evacuate the building, not evacuate? You mentioned Chief Bailey was having conversations with some folks. You guys were involved? Yep, go ahead.
No, I just want to clarify because I think this is a sticking point. It was never evacuate, don't evacuate. It was evacuate now or extend.
Okay.
Right, with the potential to hold for a building engineer. And I don't think the call was ever, hey, we're just leaving, we're done.
It wasn't that black and white.
No, it was, are we pushing people out now, right? Or are we holding for what we hope is a better situation tomorrow?
Yeah. So what kind of conversations were you guys having about us, like supporting the people? There were conversations about bringing heaters in. Was it a cold enough night where we needed to think about that? Did we think about food? Like, what were some of the considerations that were being thrown out?
So I think that the categorization that this was a transition in terms of who was in charge is exactly accurate. And I would say the instructions that I got from the ops chief were it kind of transitioned when the director of, the manager from DHCA, Department of Housing and Community Assistance, arrived, kind of at that point. But to answer your which occurred later that night and certainly the next morning, to answer your question directly, we were thinking about the fact it's 10 o'clock, 10:30 at night. We're getting feedback that a lot of people are asleep. We believe that the people that are most in need have already evacuated. And there was a lot of discussion about darkness. It was a relatively warm night. I mean, not 60 degrees like today, but it was, I think, in the mid-50s that day.
Sure.
It was supposed to get very cold the next day, which did factor into the decision. But we kind of felt like we were in a place where daylight would help us both in the time to plan, and the Housing Opportunity Commission people said they could have all the hotel rooms they needed to move people by the next day. So kind of there was and we had a lot of discussion about, is it safe to leave people in the building? Fire code enforcement was involved with that, so was DHCA. And ultimately the decision was made, if we pushed this until the next morning, we still knew we were going to have to evacuate, because I think one of the things fire rescue brought is we all have experienced the unrealistic expectation sometimes that we get from building people and contractors about how quickly they can resolve problems. So I think we were trying to push the realization on everybody involved in this that these estimates they're giving us are not realistic.
Okay.
So, we know we're probably going to have to evacuate, but we think it's going to happen better tomorrow.
Okay.
And the ops chief was there, and that was kind of the decision he was driving as well.
Sure.
And he had a good relationship with the DHCA manager, and that was kind of I think what got it to that point.
Yeah, and I think that's an important point, right? We don't want to be meeting these folks for the first time at Westbard Ave, right?
No.
We want to be able that we're fostering and meeting these folks and having these conversations and being able to then leverage those relationships when we're in situations like this. And I think that's an important point, right? All right, so we're through the night, right? We decided we're going to extend this at this point, right? We're not moving anybody. It's dark. It's better to shelter in place at this point. Morning time comes. What changes or what doesn't change?
Actually,
Take it from-
one of the key point, which I forgot, is Pepco, in my opinion, did an excellent job on this incident. I've been
Yep.
on other ones where they were late to the game, but unlike some other incidents I've been on, they sent the right crew the first time, and
Okay.
they basically said, we're in this until the end. So one of the things that also made me personally more comfortable leaving it overnight was Pepco was going to stay there all night. So if there was any additional problem, they could cut the power immediately.
Okay.
So,
Yep.
so that actually made a significant difference to me because I felt, if, like I said, if something else shorted out, it could be resolved immediately.
Hey, and something that just I thought about, did we stay on scene all night
We did not.
supporting, right? So at what point did we de-escalate
So,
our units and
and I-
our people?
Yeah, there were a lot of factors in that decision, but one of the biggest ones was we had a time frame through Ride-On. So Ride-On had already committed buses. There were already shelters open. OEMHS, who are awesome. If you don't know them, go meet them. Had pretty much said like, hey, I can hold this bus. I want to say it was till 0100 the next day. But the message, we agreed we could broadcast a message, which at this point we're doing through, people walking up and down stairs. Hey, if you want to go to the shelter on a bus, get downstairs by 1 o'clock. At 1 o'clock, everything's done.
Okay.
So we put that time in place. Buses left.
And that was our people giving that message?
No, they had,
Okay.
I want to say 15 or plus security folk. I don't know where they came from, but they had a whole bunch of people show up to walk up and down stairs for us.
Okay.
And then similarly, we had committed, I want to say at that point, we had an engine and ambulance to support us. So once they said, hey, once this is pausing, there's no more buses, there's no more shelters, there's no more fire rescue we're going to step at. And if I can steal your time for one more second, huge shout out to Company 11. I'm new. I was nervous. I walked out there. There's all this stuff going on. I'm worried about these folks who've been on scene now for what, like 8-9 hours? And I'm the messenger about to tell them, hey, we're having a serious conversation about keeping you here until 0700.
Okay.
I think I walked up, I breathed in to exhale and say these bad orders, and I got the hand up, hey, we own this, sir. We got it. Whatever you got, we're going to do it. And not just to say that's awesome, but I want to give them the kudos, because for me at that moment, that freed up so much brain power to do other things. Like it's super important. I want them to be recognized.
Right, because we want to make sure we're taking care of our
Yep.
folks and doing right by them, but sometimes we have to be the bearer of bad news too, right?
Yeah.
When we're looking at the bigger picture and trying to solve bigger problems and being able to communicate that, hey, I know this is going to suck, but
Yep.
this is for the greater good.
I know this is gonna, and I got the hand.
Right.
We're fed, we're clean, we own it. Go back to
Good idea for the next assessment center.
Yeah.
Right. All right. Morning time.
So, got back at 9:30. We had made arrangements with everybody to meet at 9:30 in the same room. We had tables out. We formed a planning team, and I think you're looking now at the folks that were in the planning team, but it was DHCA, Department of Housing and Community Assistance, and I was given very clear instructions from Chief Bailey that they were the incident commander. We were just there to support them. I think in my real job, I work with a lot of IMTs and that kind of stuff. I was sort of perceiving this as we're kind of providing an IMT to them, and it's common for an IMT from a completely different agency or department in the government to support a different function.
Sure.
So that's kind of what I was sort of assuming. I will say, though, what was clear is that we do provide an expertise in risk-based decision-making and providing a reality to how long things take that I think they found very useful.
Sure, yeah.
So we had this planning meeting at 9:30. We briefed both everybody on this list here, which is a pretty impressive interagency list, along with all of the companies that the ops chief had brought in,
Yeah.
which are listed. And we talked about the fact that we had we only had one phase of power working. It was sporadic. We had no heat. And by this time, the new weather pattern was starting to be noticeable by people. It wasn't cold yet in the building, but it was starting to get cold outside. That, I think, assisted in us driving the importance of the fact that this building couldn't be occupied any longer
Okay.
with no heat.
So a couple of things that I see here.
Right.
You obviously didn't spend a night there, right?
No.
You went home,
Yeah, I went home and
got some
came back.
sleep.
Right,
Yeah. And
right.
what time were you called back, or did
No.
was that
We had-
something
I'm
you
sorry, We had
planned?
made arrangements with everybody that we were gonna re-meet at
Okay.
9:30.
And then did you have a conference call with Chief Lay in the morning or something? And
You know, he came.
you
in.
just showed up
He
and you were
came
like, "Hey,
in. Right.
come with me," right?
Right.
All right. And then how did you figure out the units, right? Because you added there were 5 units or so that came back
So
into play.
The units that we got the second morning were arranged by Chief Bailey through
Okay.
ECC.
Okay.
So I don't know how he picked them,
Sure.
or how ECC picked them. So we briefed them. We talked about, the situation in the building. We talked about the fact we were basically, an IMT plus providing support to evacuation, whatever they needed. We did have one additional smoke scare, so it was good we were there.
Okay.
We probably prevented another box alarm by being there, which turned out just to be residual stuff from the previous night. And that we were basically there to monitor building conditions, make sure nobody else got injured, hopefully, deal with anything that occurred and assist residents with movement. We scheduled roughly an hour long, or briefings roughly every hour. We met again at 10 o'clock. And we were, just confirmed we were relocating 205 units and that HOC was providing hotels. For those that are not familiar, HOC is a quasi-county agency. They're not a full county agency. And they're essentially the owner of this building, so they were functioning, just like a
So HOC is
Housing Opportunity Commission.
awesome.
And at this point, we had developed, based on conversations with the maintenance folks and the Realty Investment Trust, we had developed a planning assumption that it was going to be a 5-night stay in the hotel rooms.
Oh wow. Okay.
We scheduled the fact that we were going to start moving residents at, start notification of residents at 1 o'clock or 1300, and we were going to move them around 1500. Actually, have them out around 1500.
So we're almost 24 hours into this at this
Yes,
point.
yeah, right. So there's some logistics on there that folks that people were bringing in. We also added animal control to the IMT, which we needed. There was a big discussion about bus transportation, but we ultimately didn't have a lot of buses, and it was felt that because they had 185 parking permits for 205 units, that probably most people had cars and they would want to take their own
Drop.
car.
Right. Right.
We also added MCPS to this because there
public
were
schools?
a number of kids in the building that went to local schools, and this was an ability to provide them a solution for school the next morning. Shout out to my wife, honestly, who was a principal, recently retired principal at that elementary school, who suggested that I do this, and that actually turned out to be something that was helpful.
And I'm sorry, I missed it. What is it that we did?
We
Include
got
MC
MCPS security involved, and they arranged for special bus transportation for the kids the next day
Oh,
so they could all get to school. Actually,
fed 'em too, right?
the Woodacres and Whitman schools actually had a pizza party for them that night. But the main thing was bus transportation and making sure that their principals were aware that something was going on. And I think there were about 15 or 20 kids in the building.
So much stuff that we don't
Right.
think about, right, on a normal basis. This is definitely not something I'm thinking about going on a box alarm. Right? Am I going to have to get these kids to school lunch tomorrow, right? So that's really interesting stuff, and it's good to know people, right?
So, yep, so that's, if we could move to the next slide here. So, all this stuff's going on, work's getting done in between. One thing I didn't mention is at some point the command bus showed up, and we moved the command team from this room in the building into the command bus, and that actually was helpful. At 1:45 or 13:45, we had one of our planning meetings, and this was a place where we really kind of had to tell some county government officials that they really needed to fix the plan, because what had happened, or county government, really HOC people, because what had happened is we had been dealing with the emergency manager from HOC who had been giving us this line about hotel rooms. At this 1345 call, the director of HOC, or executive director, dialed in by phone. She was coming from the airport trying to get to the scene. She had not been read into the plan, and she essentially completely changed the plan while she
Oh,
was on the
gosh.
phone in this meeting.
Yeah.
DHCA had to do a sidebar with her and tell her, no, we're not doing what you just said because it doesn't comply with code. And what they wanted to do was HOC wanted to only get hotel rooms for the people who lived in the building that were under rental assistance, and all of the market rate clients, which was the majority of them, they wanted them to basically go out and get a hotel
Be on
room
their own,
themselves
right.
or use their rental insurance. DHCA, the housing authority, said, no, you can't do that. This is your problem. You owe everybody a hotel room. So that caused a real scramble because they then realized they didn't have enough hotel rooms. We almost didn't meet our deadline to start evacuating,
wow.
but ultimately HHS, Health and Human Services, got involved and used County Health and Human Services got involved, used some of their contacts and their Red
So-
Cross contacts to come up with some additional rooms they had. So ultimately, we met the deadline.
And how many people were in the command bus at this point? Because I know it gets kind of tight in there.
It
so
was, the meetings, we probably had 10. People were, hanging out down the hall, looking around the corner, but,
Sure.
but it worked.
Okay.
And it was even tighter than normal because it was parked on Westbard Avenue. So MCP decided they didn't want to open one of the extensions because it would have blocked a lane of traffic. So, it was even a little tighter, but it still was better than being in the building.
Right.
At that meeting, we really sort of put the fire at the HOC, told them, we're going to start evacuating at 14:30. Bottom line is the evacuation, they finally got the hotel rooms, the evacuation happened. A couple of things that were kind of standout events. I just would echo what Chief Neidhart said. Everybody I dealt with MCR4S was fantastic. Nobody complained. Listen, I've been doing this a long time. I know this isn't a lot of lines people's favorite jobs,
Right.
but nobody complained. The residents were appreciative, and it really was it was a standout moment for all the crews that were there. Kensington came up with a loaner wheelchair for a person who was in the building and couldn't use his power wheelchair because it was way too heavy to come down the stairs. So there were, a bunch of kind of, events that popped up. About 15:30, we realized that we probably weren't going to be done with this when we thought. So we wanted to get relief. So at 16:30, a batch of units were sent to relieve the crews that have been there with me since 9:30. It happened at about the right time because by the time the relief crews got there, the evacuation had started, and the crews that were doing assisting with the evacuations had made a bunch of trips up and down, so the relief crew was right on time. Maybe if I had it to do over, I might have called for them a little bit earlier,
Okay.
but it was about right. We finished everything at 18:30. It was noticeably colder at 18:30, and it was obvious why we needed to evacuate the building. I would say one other note, ECC called and said, hey, we have a person fainted across the street at the Giant. Do you have a unit to send? I thought about it for a second. I said, do I really want to commit a unit away from this? But then I said, no, we better do it. Turned out to be a cardiac arrest.
Oh, wow.
So, Chief Ogren was in the command post with me. He's sitting in the room here with us, but he was looking in his CAD terminal, and we knew that the call was kind of escalating, so we sent paramedic engine 718, and they were the first on the scene for a code. I think we would have been embarrassed if we hadn't have released them. So I just, I was glad that I
Something just kind of
Yeah,
reached out and
just-
said, hey,
yeah,
we
yeah,
should do
yeah.
this. Wow. Okay.
So, small media presence, which Chief Ogren took care of. I was actually surprised that it didn't happen until like the end of day 2. I was really surprised they hadn't been there before that. And about 1915, we started sending people home and demobilized the IMT right after
Was
that.
Chief Ogren operating as the PIO? And I'll let you answer since he's sitting over there.
He actually was sent as planning support.
Okay.
And I have after action items for myself, but honestly, one of the after actions I have for myself is we didn't really, as familiar as I am with ICS and all the IMT functions, we really didn't use them to the extent we could have, and we probably should have done that.
Okay.
Because this was big enough
Well,
for that. But
don't steal my what are we gonna do better question here.
So anyway,
But so before we get there, is there anybody else that wants to add anything, Chief Bezos? Is there anything you want to add?
So along the same lines of what everybody is saying is I don't think fire rescue operates in a vacuum anymore. I think we're building relationships with other agencies, and that's a good thing, and
Yep.
it's helping us out to either support or for them to support us in managing the incident. So long are the days where we're operating alone and doing something, we're actually
Yep.
reaching out to other agencies.
Yeah, and I think it's safe to say that these incidents are just continuing to show that we are way more involved into the communities and actually helping solve problems beyond just 911 calls, right? Right. Chris?
I think this call was cool for me. And for me, it sort of felt like pulling a lens out and seeing ourselves not as fire rescue, but as government. And I don't mean to let YouTube blow me up on that one. And by that, I mean, I don't think anyone's going to go home or, go to the retirement party and talk about that time they sat at Westbard, for 9 hours waiting for nothing to happen. But, if we empathize with the people we dealt with, right, think about the kid who got to go to school the next day at their school, right? Think about the people who didn't get thrown into the street in the middle of the night. There was a lot of effort to make that happen. Fire rescue was a big part of that, and I think everyone on that incident deserves credit and should know that even though that maybe that little slice you got doesn't feel super fun, I think in the whole we
The impact was big.
yeah.
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 Well said. Anything else, Chief?
one thing I just realized I missed in my slides, on the slides which I think we showed, to the right of the text was a screenshot of a Microsoft Teams message board. That was an extremere important communications mechanism for us to the outside world, specifically county government officials.
Okay.
And we were initially, there was a lot of discussion the first night, which honestly I didn't really see until kind of after the incident. But the second day, we were using it to type in reports every hour or so, and it was going directly to people in the county executive's office, Chief Bailey, countless other people, to keep them informed of what was going on.
Yeah, and communications is
the
important.
one take-home point I would say to command officers that are not necessarily familiar with Microsoft Teams is that probably it's time to learn how to get involved in it, because it's an important incident management tool.
Yeah. Well, she runs my day to day.
Right.
Yeah. Chief Blankhorn, I'm going to hit you with the same thing, last comments, and then I'm going to hit you with the second part here once you're done, but go ahead.
No, I think from the initial incident command post, again, two takeaways, and I pass this on to new officers. I'm still fairly new myself, but one of the things I've learned being a chief officer is not to be afraid to sometimes get out of the command post and get your own, if you feel like you're missing information or you need better situational awareness, whether it's early in the incident because you're parked behind some trees and you can't see the house. I've gotten out before, or this was later in the event when I wasn't getting the information I needed from the maintenance man. I said, you know what, I told Chief Sherburne, I said, I'm going to go talk to him myself, and that made a world of difference in this event.
Yeah. And operating in the command teams allows us
Right.
that
Right.
opportunity, right? Because I can say, hey, Chief,
Well-
hey, here's the radio for a second, I'll be right back, right?
Yep.
So, all right, so you got anything else?
I got some stuff.
Oh, go ahead, Chief Davis.
4 items, all unrelated. Answer them however you wish, whatever order. Was this a problem building? In other words, we have a number of buildings out there right now, not a whole, maybe a handful, but people know them, they're problem, been to them, other issues going on there, complex issues at those places. So that's one question. Was that a problem building? Had it been on the radar? 2, were they condos versus rentals? And if they were, whichever one, would it have mattered if they were the other one? And out of curiosity, how far away did those people get housed? Like, did they get housed in Bethesda, or did they go to Greenbelt or Frederick or whatever, right?
Let me get my
And
team.
what did Red Cross end up doing?
Oh.
What did they play? So those 4 items, however you choose to answer.
Anybody?
I can do Red Cross real easy. We put them in service.
Because
So part of it, I know, depending on who you get, or I say I know, it's my understanding that if the cause is fire-related, then they're all in. If it's not fire-related, then they're not necessarily in. We were in a gray area, but we went through OEMHS and their team, and they had already stepped up shelters and everything was in place. There was another incident that I don't have details on that was taxing our system at this time, which I know we haven't mentioned, but there was another big thing happening that was taxing all that stuff. So it was, we put them in service.
gotcha.
So I don't have the exact numbers, Chief Neidhart may, but the hotels were mostly in the Bethesda area. They did wind up pushing a few, I think, up to Shady Grove Road, but they made those decisions based on where the kids needed to go to school. Did they have kids? Did they have cars? So they were, they had a fairly good, methodology for distribution, and most of them were in the general area. The building is entirely rental. I don't honestly, if it were condo, it might have changed it a little bit, honestly, but I'm not familiar enough with the DHCA regulations to know that. And what was the last question?
Problem building?
Problem building.
I don't particularly, I know we run a fair amount of calls there, EMS calls, and 11 specifically. I wouldn't call it a problem building per se, but obviously, it had had an alarm system out of service for a long period of time, so it's clearly under
Sure.
supervision.
But are we talking about like a vulnerable population that, per se? And I say popular in a, economic.
Not a
and-
large one, but it did have some vulnerable residents.
Okay, right. And were those identified and handled first? Because I know there were some discussions about who was going to get assistance or not, and was that ever even part of the decision making? It may have not been, right?
So the interesting thing, Chief Neidhart talked about the difficulty we had getting an occupant list. I'm really curious to know, and this is a question I'm sure we won't know the answer to, but whether the difficulty he had was genuinely a tech problem that they had and a power problem, or whether it was a stalling tactic. Because I know that DHCA had expressed concern during the after-action meeting that we had at OEM about the fact that they had trouble getting the list from the management, and they had to actually, say we're going to cite you if you don't give it to us, kind of thing.
The woman I was
So-
dealing with at that moment was very much engaged, very much trying to help.
Gotcha.
I can't speak to the bigger plan, but
Gotcha.
when we were talking, she was
Do
trying.
you think it was a genuine tech?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. All right, so Chief Blinky, lessons learned, things you wish you could have done better, any hindsight you can offer us?
No, this call went pretty well, considering the prolonged event. The initial call, it wasn't much to it. Like I said, it was an arcing event in an electrical room. I did let my companies know I did not want them in that electrical room. So I think that's a takeaway, right? Is you had a lot of people in there taking pictures or looking. Had that third phase shorted out like the first ones, that's a room you don't want to be in when that's happening.
I could have
right.
reached out and
Yeah.
grab
So
somebody.
again, you want to know what that looks like, just look up arc flash on YouTube.
Hmm.
And I do want to bring up a point that Chief Davis brought up offline, that this is an older building, and we have a lot of very similar buildings throughout the county that have infrastructures, whether it be electrical, plumbing, et cetera, that are just getting older. And this is probably, I don't want to say become common, but something we're going to see again in the future.
Not the last time we're
Right.
talking about this.
Probably not the last time we're going to be talking about an event like this.
Right.
Yep.
Okay, Chief Nick?
So the things I would have done differently, as I said earlier, I would have used some of the ICS tools and check-in and check-out lists and some other stuff in a more formal manner. I'm really on the fence as to whether this needed a formal IAP or not, but I think we could have at least verbalized it better. I do think that this is a trend. I was just sort of thinking here, but I've been on, this is the fourth incident I've run with this kind of problem. Willard Avenue call a long time ago, Pooks Hill Road a couple of years ago. Chief Davis and I were involved in working with DHCA in the same way we did at this call during the Rive Silver Spring. Now, it was a much smaller part of a large incident, but we did essentially the same thing. So, I think, it's definitely something coming, in the future. Chief Neidhart wrote out a couple of good questions, and one of them, I think, or 2 points that he made, I think, are worth highlighting. One is this IMT was really a bunch of experts sitting in a room, and if you throw a problem out on the table and with all these people in the room, it's much easier to solve it because everybody's got their own Rolodex. And the thing we bring to the table is we're just really good at sort of pushing decisions and not making decisions. The other thing he also asked is, what's the difference between incident command and unified command? And I say there's 2 times when that really needs to happen. One is we do this is when multiple agencies start to come into play, and the other thing is when we need to adjudicate resources. So maybe we've got multiple incidents going on, and the doc is in a position where, I'll use a different example. I had this happen to me on an apartment fire in Westlake Drive, I think last Thanksgiving or something, where I was doing the EMS branch, and I got a call from the doc saying, how many of those ambulances you have in the EMS branch can you release? Because we've got 15 calls going on over here that we don't have ambulances for in a different part of the county.
Good point.
So I think that's the other place where it really kind of
and I think that's important, right? From their standpoint, they're looking at the bigger picture. Right. We're looking at a big picture. They're looking at the even bigger picture, right? And I've definitely been on EMS calls before, specifically crash where, there were people everywhere, and I had more ambulances. And it's happened to me twice in my short career as a battalion chief. The first time I was still a captain, bumped up, and I had all the tankers in a bunch of rubbish fire in 17's area. And Chief Kerrigan called me and was like, hey, you can't have all of them, right? I need a couple just in case. And then the second time was something similar with ambulances on a wreck, and he's like, do you need all 15 ambulances, right? We need to think about those things too when we're sitting in the car, even though a lot of the time we'll just focus on the incident in front of us, right? So it's nice to have that perspective from the assistant chief level. Chief Neidhart, same question.
Tons of lessons learned, big ones. I guess one that we probably don't have time to get into, but the legal, moral, and logistical effects of evacuating or mandating an evacuation are far more nuanced and complex than I thought. So you don't just get to go in with a white shirt and say, get out. It's not that simple. Huge appreciation for the duty chief and realizing that I thought a duty chief was just a super battalion chief. I'm sorry. Now I realize that you guys know actually a lot of stuff and a lot of people.
What did they do all day?
Yeah, I just figured they were super chiefs, but they're a huge resource to be relied on. What would I have done different on the quick? I feel like I'm more confident in my role now. So in that time, I felt like I was sort of probing my environment. I'd get over that and get to work. I think the command bus or a hardened command post would have been helpful earlier. I think pushing for mission objectives codified earlier would have been helpful. I think that's the big stuff.
Yeah, but it's a testament to our system and the way we have layers and safeties and different parts of it, right? And I think you being the newer one in the town, I know I only got like 2 more seconds than you do, but you're getting to see and taste this stuff now, right? So that's super cool perspective. Yeah. So appreciate that. Chief Pezos.
So one, I want to recognize Command for the great job that they did. It's such a plus having senior staff that not only know the SOP for the high-rise, but actually have done incident command for it. So one of the things that I think is important is that this facility had bathrooms for the personnel, right? So we have to talk about support for the crews that have been on the scene for a while. There were bathrooms there. We didn't have to worry about bathrooms. The bowling alley next door fed pizza, and I'm not too sure if everybody got a slice, but they fed people pizza. I think as a duty chief, next time that might not be the case. Next time that might not be for the case for command, and we have to somehow think about some hygiene, and somehow feeding the people that are on the scene and doing proper rotation.
Good point.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's all I have. Thank you guys so much for coming up here and sharing your story. I know it's not super easy to stand up here. Chief Blinky said he wasn't going to do this ever again, and here he is. So you're almost to Ivan Browning status. We're going to have to give you a free sandwich or something at some point. So, but that's all I have. Thank you guys for watching. We have a couple more episodes coming up, at least 3 more. We should have one at the end of March. We're going to have the Froms folks coming in April. And Chief Davis is finalizing another rescue episode with Jason Eberly and those SMEs. So thank you guys so much for participating and watching, and we'll catch you next time.
A firefighter rescuer is considered to be one of the most dangerous and stressful careers. However, it can be one of the most rewarding. Montgomery County professional firefighters and paramedics work a 24-hour shift, 48 hours off. DFRS personnel report to duty at their station by 7 a.m. Then, the officer in charge assigns riding positions on the engine, truck, medic unit, ambulance, or squad for that shift and discuss the scheduled activities. At the beginning of the shift, they thoroughly check the apparatus and equipment. It is important that the firefighter rescuer and their equipment is always prepared for any and all eventuality. DFRS personnel spend approximately 2 hours engaging in physical training. This usually includes stretching exercise, aerobics conditioning, and strength training with weights. Through physical training, they increase their strength and endurance, both of which are critical for the jobs they must perform. Firefighters must be in excellent physical condition, since they must frequently lift and carry heavy equipment, such as ladders, fire hose, and nozzles. This is done while wearing full protective clothing and breathing apparatus, which weighs 57 pounds. Other daily activities include training drills where the firefighters, rescuers sharpen their skills and familiarize themselves with new equipment. DFRS personnel prepare themselves for the possibilities of any kind of incident that may occur. With the development of advanced firefighting, rescue, and life support techniques and the expanding county population, firefighters and paramedics are training longer and harder to meet the complex needs of our community. Some of the other activities include public education, where they teach the community the basics of fire safety and injury prevention, fire safety inspections of public building, general station maintenance, and administrative duties. During a 24-hour shift, 48 hours a week, firefighters and paramedics live and work together as a team, cooking meals and maintaining the station they call home for approximately a third of their life. Regardless of the time of day, in every weather condition, DFRS responds to your call for help.